Thank you very much, Peter and ladies and gentlemen. And I noticed when Peter was going through that long list of organisations and businesses that Chamber actually represent, he talked about, I think it was gold mining and diamonds in South Africa. He didn't actually mention farmers from Fermanagh. So I'm quite disappointed in that respect, but maybe we have others who will represent that. But look, clearly, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation here this morning. And it's a privilege for me to come and speak to a group like this, a group that actually makes Northern Ireland tick. And people often say to me, well, look, business people are in business for themselves, but business people are in business to make Northern Ireland better, to make the UK better, to make Europe better, to make the world better. And I often believe that if it wasn't for the businesses and those people who have the drive to take on that business initiative, where would we be? And I think we need to recognise that. But anyway, I am fully aware of the immense work that the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce carries out for the economic good of the country. And I thank you all for that work and those that are involved in it, particularly during the long and difficult years of political instability within Northern Ireland. And let me open with a very simple fact of political life. Government works best when it works together. Headed in the same direction and towards the same set of goals. For it takes a strong, united government with a collectively agreed economic strategy to create the circumstances where businesses and business people can actually thrive, allowing them to offer the employment and opportunities that generates the wealth to fund our public services. We cannot go on the way we have been going. It is true that many individual businesses and sectors are doing relatively well, and full credit to all those in this room and indeed beyond who have made Northern Ireland a stable society now. However, on average and in aggregate, Northern Ireland is falling further behind not just the rest of the United Kingdom, but much of the rest of the world. As a proud Ulsterman, this is not where I wished devolution to lead us. As we know from last week's figures, a gap is opening up once again between our unemployment claimant count and the UK average. The number of people claiming unemployment benefit last month reached 59,000, a rise of 100 on the previous month, which means that unemployment has reached its highest rate in 13 years. Over the past year, the jobless total has risen 3,300, an increase of almost 6%, making the annual increase in Northern Ireland the largest in the UK. Of course, policymakers and administrators have been active over the years, whether under the old Stormont regime, direct rule, or now the Northern Ireland Assembly. Since the mid-1950s, there have been 15 major reviews or strategies for the Northern Ireland's economic development. Maybe number 16 will come in the very near future as well. But we have continued to lag behind the rest of the UK in the same way that for decades after the 1861-65 American Civil War, the southern states lagged behind the northern ones. And in fact, in 1964, one of my predecessors and party leader Terence O'Neill, who was also Prime Minister at the time, said we should aspire to have caught up with the UK average levels of GDP per head by 2010. Isn't that remarkable that I'm here speaking now in 2011 and quoting from something that was quoted in 1964 that should have been relevant to 2010. But it obviously didn't happen. The troubles, apart from the obvious and appalling human cost, represented a tragic waste of economic resources. However, our shortcomings since the 1960s also represent the outcome of policy and other mistakes. At the start of the last decade, the then economic strategy, which was Strategy 2020, said we could reach 90% of the UK's average income levels by 2010. Well, that aspiration, like O'Neill's, languished. Indeed, according to the official statistics from NICC, average incomes in Northern Ireland outside Belfast are now only 2/3 of those in the rest of the United Kingdom. Figures from the IMF for 2010 suggest that living standards in Shanghai are now almost 2/3 of the UK average. So there you have the challenge. It's no longer about just catching up with England or Germany or France. We are also falling behind the 20 million people living in the richest city in China. And apologies for that lengthy journey into economic statistics, but we have to be realistic. It was necessary because I'm going to argue our continued economic shortcomings owe much to our own peculiar system of government. My party, the Ulster Unionist Party, did the heavy lifting and made many sacrifices to put in place the Belfast Agreement in 1998. Given the legacy of the Troubles, it was right at that time to impose unusually strong safeguards into our system of government, but the world moves on. We are now in 2011, 13 years on. Mandatory coalition of 4 and now indeed 5 parties no longer produces the sort of good government necessary to underpin business success. All around the world, from Venezuela to Russia, we see how unstable and non-transparent government fails to provide the foundation for sustainable economic growth. Of course, our first and deputy first ministers are not exactly equivalent to Putin or Chavez, but our enforced coalition of almost everybody leads to bad government. How, for example, can you have effective lobbying for change if the government itself never changes? That's why the Ulster Unionist Party is making a case for an officially recognised opposition by 2015 at the latest. It's why we want the programme for government agreed in advance of forming the next executive, which focuses next month. Mandatory coalition locks into the executive committee an array of political parties whose economic belief range from centre-right through to the crypto-Marxism of Sinn Féin. Therefore, on many issues, and not just economic, the result is mutual veto, deadlock, endless consultation, or kicking the whole thing into limbo. That's not good in general, and is certainly not good for business in particular. But that said, we are where we are. Opposition is not going to happen overnight. And that means that the big socio-economic issues facing any government are still going to be present in the ongoing difficulties for the next executive committee. No single party and no single strategy dominates within our structures, which means that much of our time is consumed in trying to reconcile the seemingly irreconcilable and creating something coherent out of contradictory policies. Many of you will think, oh, for the joys of a mandatory coalition. Anyway, even though we know that we can't have it all our own way, the Ulster Unionist Party does have clear economic strategy. We acknowledge that Northern Ireland's economy is over-reliant on the public sector, although we have to accept that the over-reliance is partly attributable to decades of terrorist activity and political instability. But a new and hopefully post-conflict era for Northern Ireland means that we have to reassess how we organise and finance ourselves. The answer does not lie in simply slashing and burning the public sector, particularly when we are in the middle of a recession. Rather, the solution to rebalancing our economy lies in 3 actions: growing the private sector, enhancing the power of the social economy to liberate those currently shackled by the poverty trap, and ensuring each and every public service job has meaning and purpose for the post holder and indeed all within public alike. I know also that many of you in the private sector support devolving the power to vary corporation tax. This is a policy which the Ulster Unionist Party has favoured for some time. Indeed, when we first promoted the idea, many of the other parties dismissed it as a pipe dream. But should the decision to lower the rate be taken, then we believe it should be done incrementally, over a number of years, and in a manner which is both flexible and sensitive to the ever-changing economic environment. The implications for a differential corporation tax rate for the block grant must be addressed. For example, with an imaginative review of non-domestic rates. I know some of you will shudder when I use the phrase an imaginative review, but you must face the reality that help at one end of the scale must often be tempered with adjustments at the other end. The aim, of course, is to ensure that the accrued benefits of a reduction in corporation tax far outweigh any other changes which may be required. But changing corporation tax alone will not solve all our problems. It has to be the centrepiece of a basket of initiatives comprising the Economic Enterprise Zone envisioned in our 2010 General Election Manifesto. A 5% VAT rate on repair, maintenance and improvement of domestic dwellings would mirror the advantages of the existing rate applied on the Isle of Man, which was enabled by the Treasury's successful lobbying of the EU for derogation. The failure of the Executive to come up with a plan to offset air passenger duty means that Stormont is backing Dublin over Belfast. It appears that local ministers are willing to see business lost to Dublin Airport through an unwillingness to offset air passenger duty levels here for transatlantic services. Currently, economy and business passengers are levied at a rate of £60 and £120, compared with €3